now just kind of enumerate that for payroll, inventory, and the other ones, these things should now you should now be able to see the pattern and from the table be able to make some decisions. And I think with that, Robin, I'm going to quit. My voice is giving out, but I'm certainly available for any questions if anybody has anything on this that they would like to talk about.
Wonderful, Peter. We do have a texted question that it came in.
Sure.
Actually, we have a couple of them. Will the changelog track when something is purged or just when something is changed in the master record?
Good question. I didn't make that clear. It actually tracks adds, changes, and deletes. So it kind of puts in a one-sided record when you add a customer. If you're doing a customer changelog, it'll show the add when you add the customer. It'll do the before and after image when you change a customer, and it'll put a kind of a one-sided entry in when you delete the customer, say that this is the image of the customer when you deleted it. So it covers all three situations.
That's great. And then we have another one. What about the print-to-disk reports?
Good question. I've got good news and I've got bad news. The good news is that in the upcoming release, we're going to expand the number. I believe it's going to 8 digits. Now, that's kind of good news with a bad news slant to it, because although it means that we're not going to be running out of the kind of number problems that we've had in the past, and we certainly have had issues like that, it does mean that there is a bigger maintenance issue, because who wants to manage 200 gazillion reports out there? It becomes a bigger management issue. In the current systems, we have to be careful, and I'm glad you mentioned this because it actually is an important issue. I'm going to make sure that it goes on the list for later. When the system, a couple of principles about the way this works. Obviously, the system assigns numbers sequentially. So it's counting from 1 up to 9999. Although the system creates a file name which is company number, application, and report number every time you print a report. The ones that you print to disk are the only ones that show up, but they're not the only ones that take a number. So that your print to disk reports are not necessarily going to be continuous. But more important for our purposes, those numbers keep on going up, and they don't necessarily just bump up one at a time. So what's going to happen is when we get to the top of the list at 9999, it's going to wrap around back to 1 and start to go back through the list again. If we haven't purged, if we haven't gotten rid of reports from the disk, the program actually has enough smarts to do a half-assed job, which is that simply it goes through and tries to find a hole. But that hole is based on the report number. And that in turn can cause a problem, because if it finds that if let's say you had out there an AP report that was AP report number 1234, and it has an AR report and it's looking for a slot, it'll slot it into an empty slot. But if it thinks that 1234 is available and it's got an AR report, it'll attempt to write it. And now you can end up with two reports that are kind of competing for each other. So the thing to take away from this is periodically copy off, print all your reports so that you can delete them, even if you're printing them to a null printer. But you do need to print your reports. The posted reports need status of being printed. So you print your reports, and at that point you can delete them. Before you delete them, since they are text files, you can copy them. You can go into the RWPRT directory. Let me just show you where those are. Might as well go in here. The RWPRT folder happens to be empty in this case. Let's find another example. Here's our list. So there's the company ID, CA, here's the AP for the module name, and here's the series of reports. Now what you can do is, since these reports are actual text files, these can actually be opened up and looked at in a text file an editor such as WordPad or Notepad. So what you can do periodically is copy all of these out to a CD-ROM and save all of them, and then you can delete them from the index, and then those numbers become available. So those are what your options are right now. You print them, and then you copy them to a CD-ROM, and then you use the existing print file utilities to delete them, and that recycles the numbers. I would like to see a more sophisticated way of archiving the reports, and we have that partway developed, and we may well be implementing that, in that when we run, if you'd use PDFs, and this is another way around that issue, by the way, if you use PDFs, since the PDF processor actually saves the file with markings in it that allow the system to know what it is, we put this away in the PDF form file processing, and we can actually see what's out there. Now, what we added when we put in this system is we added the ability to refresh it so that we can move PDFs off to other storage and then simply refresh the PDF master file by selecting this item here, and it'll go through and read the storage areas where those files are and recreate the entries in the file. We don't have that for the spool file right now, but that's in the works. So we have a couple of things in the works, all of which unfortunately is future right now. To bring it back to the hardcore present, what you have to do now when you're running out of numbers, when you're running off the top, is you have to print a certain range of reports so that they are marked as printed. That way the posting reports will allow you to delete them, because the system won't allow you to delete posting reports without them being printed. Print all those reports, then delete them, then you can, print the reports, then copy them off if you want to save them, then delete them, and that will release the space. I might mention that a cyclic monthly review makes sense. For example, if you look at the range of data in the print reports from disk, I can see that, for example, in January, I did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now, this is test system, so this doesn't really make a lot of sense, just 10 reports. But if you look at the report numbers and sort it by the count of the reports, you can say, as of the beginning of June through to the end of June, I produced 1,000 reports. Well, since we have 10,000 numbers, 9999, what that means is at 1,000 reports per month, you have about 12 months. I'm sorry, you have about 10 months worth of reports before you run out of space. So your best bet there is to stay 2 or 3 or 4 months ahead of the cycle. So if you know you're in the 6,000s, what you do is make sure that you clear the 7,000s and 8,000s. That way you know you have 2 months worth of space. So if you're off sick for a week, you know, all hell isn't going to break loose, that sort of thing. So I would recommend that you put it into your maintenance cycle to review the reports, print those reports, copy them off, and delete them, and do that so that you stay 1 month ahead of what your cycle is going to be. It's going to require someone with some administrative control on this, because you know the average person just banging away on vouchers is not going to be aware that they're using up report numbers. But this was a very good point, and it needed to be made that we do need to maintain those print reports.
Well, Peter, here's another question for you, which is, do void checks clear themselves out, or is there a purge process to delete void checks?
I didn't highlight it, but when you are purging the open items, there is an option to purge void checks as well, and I would recommend that you take it at the same time, so that when we go into AP, purge, whoops, that's vendor history. Notice we have an option down here to purge void checks, so that you can keep them, or you can get rid of them. Recommend that when you purge through, let's say you're purging through to the end of 2010, through December 31st, 2010, at that point you also purge the void checks. So you don't have kind of a ragtag of a few numbers here and there, which are the void checks just hanging in there. There may be an accountancy issue here that I'm not aware of, or you may have an accountant who does want you to keep the void checks for some period of time. I can't really imagine why, but I've met strange things. So it's separate, and you can purge it out there.
Great, Peter. Thank you. And for anyone who's sort of panicking, going, wait, I didn't write all that down, these recordings are going to be available on our website. Also, we have been putting content out on YouTube.